r/explainlikeimfive. Hot competition 724 says. Explain like I'm 5. How did a few months of economic shutdown due to COVID cause literally everything to be unaffordable for years? I understand how inflation works conceptually. I guess what I have a hard time linking is the economic shutdowns due to COVID. Some money printing, literally everything is twice as expensive as it was forever, but wages don't feel like they've increased proportionally. It feels like you need to have way more income now relative to pre-COVID income to afford a home, to afford to travel, to afford to eat out, and so on. I don't mean that in an absolute sense, but in the sense that you need to have a way better job in terms of income. For instance, maybe a mechanic could afford a home in 2020, and now that same mechanic cannot. It doesn't make sense to me that the economic output of the world, or the us specifically, would be severely damaged for years and years because of the shutdown. It's just really hard for me to mentally link the shutdown to what is happening now. Please help. 10,001,110,101 balls says. There were many factors, but a significant one that doesn't get as much attention from the doomer crowd was federal unemployment insurance benefits undercutting the desperation-driven economy. The mythology of American prosperity has always been upheld by an impoverished underclass, and this group's income increased significantly during the pandemic. Not only did this make it more expensive to operate a business with higher payroll costs, it also meant more demand competition in the market, since poor people could afford to buy more stuff. For example, more people are traveling now than at any time in history, and this naturally drives up prices. People can talk all they want about corporate greed, but most people whining about inflation while buying expensive trucks, flying on airplanes, staying at hotels, or eating at restaurants are doing this on a discretionary basis. Litotrides says. I can make this really simple. Lots of money printing equals stuff gets more expensive. That's really about it. Imagine an empty island. 100 coconuts is all there is to buy or sell, and 100 coins. What's the price of a coconut? Easy, about 1 coin. But what if we suddenly 10x the number of coins without changing the hash of coconuts? Still have 100 coconuts, but now 1000 coins floating around with nothing else to use them for. What do you think happens to the price of coconuts? Afakanoki says. It's simple. It's money supply. It wasn't the shutdown. It was the printing. It will continue to go up as long as we have deficit spending. Unless we audit the Federal Reserve, we will never know how deep it goes. So what if your house is worth more if you can't afford to leave it? r/explainlikeimfive. Demolt of the Heaven says. Explain like I'm 5, the Hannibal directive. I googled it and skimmed the Wikipedia, but since it's all unofficial I'm still kind of confused. I get the basic gist though, but I need someone to tell me exactly what it really means. Internet Boyfriend 666 says. The Hannibal Directive is an Israeli military protocol that, when activated, means the Israeli military will go to any means necessary to prevent its soldiers from being captured, up to and including killing their own soldiers. In other words, if it looks like Israeli soldiers are about to be captured or are captured, the entire area will be leveled with bombs, artillery, small arms fire, or all of the above, in order to kill the Israelis' enemy, but also knowingly and willingly killing their own soldiers and sometimes even Israeli civilians. The purpose is to deny their enemy the ability to use captured Israeli soldiers as leverage in any negotiations. In other words, Israel would rather kill its own troops than negotiate with Hamas or Hezbollah or any of its regional neighbors. This is not a conspiracy theory or hyperbole. This is an extremely well-documented procedure going back decades. The Israeli military openly admits to doing this. Many legitimate journalists and news organizations have documented this. r/explainlikeimfive. Gasp says. Explain like I'm 5. Why can microwaves and infrared waves heat things up but not radio waves or visible light? What about ultraviolet, X-rays and gamma rays? R2K in the vortex says, have you never seen sun? Of course visible light heats things up. So do radio waves. Microwaves are in fact radio waves, just in a specific band. Particularly long radio waves, it might be difficult to absorb them efficiently in most materials, but if they do get absorbed then absolutely they heat things up. All the same is true for the entire rest of the electromagnetic spectrum. Manadactyl says, microwaves are the same frequencies as Wi-Fi, which are radio waves, just at a much lower power. Kinda like asking why can the sun blind me if I stare at it, but my flashlight won't blind me. They are both the same frequencies of light. It's a matter of intensity, not frequency. Junk 80 says, liquid water absorbs 2.4 GHz. Very well. Most things you heat up in a microwave to eat have a reasonably high water content all throughout. Torsen Bryan says, if you've ever used a microwave oven, you've heated something up with radio waves. Likewise, if you've ever been in a hot car in the summer or worn something black in direct sunlight, you've experienced being heated by visible light. Managing heat produced by X-ray tubes in medical equipment is an ongoing concern. Thermonuclear weapons rely on X-rays from the primary to heat and ablet an interstage material to the point where it emits enough X-rays and gamma rays to physically crush the secondary to the point of thermonuclear fusion. Photons, regardless if they're radio waves or visible light or gamma rays, carry energy. r/explainlikeimfive. Pretty Run 1778 says, explain like I'm 5. How does the contraction won't make sense? Formulaically, should it be wont? How did this exception come to be and then become the standard? Z42 says, I made this exact mistake in 2nd grade. Teacher asked for other contractions like didn't or isn't and I piped up with wont. Ye Fatband says, do non-English languages also have contractions? Z42 says, I made this exact mistake in 2nd grade. Teacher asked for other contractions like didn't or isn't and I piped up with wont. Cheekmo52 says, it's a carryover from Old English won't. Won't is a contraction of won't. In Middle English won't became one of several variants, wynot, walnut, 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 which in modern English eventually became will not, but won't is much harder to pronounce, so the contraction won't is the one that stuck. Throwaway 2,033,626 says, I always thought the contraction was would not. Rox Genghis says, how are you going to abbreviate will not and not use a single L? Watch me. Are you saying I won't be able to do it? I just did. r/explainlikeimfive. Waltz Rebreathing says, explain like I'm 5. What is the Laplace transformation? Stumbled upon it years ago, but I'm terrible at math so kinda forgot about it for years. Recently stumbled upon it again, so out of pure curiosity, what is it? Does it have real world use, or is it something purely theoretical? Shutdown says, it transforms calculus into algebra. It is incredibly useful for math involving rotations and periodic functions. Practically anything that has to do with radio, waves, electricity, etc. The math is much simpler. In electrical engineering, we solved a simple circuit that had inductors and capacitors the long way, calculus every step of the way. It covered 2 whiteboards and took most of the class period. We then solved the same problem with the Laplace transform in the frequency domain. It took a couple minutes and most of that was writing the problem down. It turned the math into add these numbers here, divide by this number here, and we are done. Arakakra says, I don't have the knowledge base to explain the what. Hit I can do the uses. I guess for explain, like I'm5, the Laplace transformation is where we take normal math and turn them partly imaginary so the math is easier. My professor said that the shortest path between two systems of equations is through the imaginary plane. Imagine your car going down the road. You want that car to be nice and steady, so we have suspension systems. This suspension might look like the mass of the body, how much it weighs. A spring lets the car body bounce up and down. A damper makes the body move a little less when it's going up and down, and the street it's driving on. We know what we want the movement of the car to look like, where the spring bounces us gently and the damper gets us back to normal, so we don't constantly bounce. So we want something to relate the force coming into our change in movement, x. This is a tough problem to math out directly. The damper converts motion to heat, so we can't add up our energy. We can test a system by applying a force to it, and then the car bounces with changing acceleration, velocity, and position. Currently we have an input and we get 3 related outputs, as velocity and acceleration are derivatives of the position, and we don't have the tools to solve this with differential equations. That's where Laplace transforms come into play. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.